Welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Kyle Madson. I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. He's Chris Biderman. He now owns a melon hat, whatever that means. And before we talk about the Christian McCaffrey contract, let's talk about our friends over at Lamb Chops.
Shout out to our friends at Lamb Chops. I am currently wearing some mesh shorts. It is hot outside. It's been hot outside. Mesh shorts from Lamb Chops. Super comfortable, aerated, breathable, everything you would want for warm weather shorts. So check out our homies at Lamb Chops. The zippered pockets, obviously, immensely clutch. Sweat shorts for when it's a little bit cooler, also extremely comfortable. Sweat pants. Hoodies, shirts, everything is comfortable. Everything is high quality. Big fans of Lamb Chops. So shout out to them. And we appreciate their support.
We are also sponsored by Prize Picks. We love daily fantasy sports with Prize Picks. It is enhanced. I've been dialed into like random Major League Baseball games. You can catch me watching some WNBA action. I'm watching darts now that's not true. I'm not watching darts because of Prize Picks, but I'm super locked into everything going on in the sports world thanks to Prize Picks Daily Fantasy. It's so easy. You pick 2 to 6 players, you pick more or less on their stat projections, and then you watch the winnings pile up. Or you could be like me right now and watching some L's pile up. But that's fine. That's why you get back on the horse and you can make another entry. Whether you like football, basketball, baseball, they got season-long stuff for the NFL. They got NBA playoffs, of course, with the NBA finals starting. You're going to want to get in right now. So go to prizepicks.com/candlestick and use promo code candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/candlestick. Promo code candlestick for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, let's talk about the Christian McCaffrey contract extension. Bro, it is, I think we already made it officially heat beating season, but today of all days, Tuesday, June 4th. Thank God the Christian McCaffrey extension got done so I could sit inside all day and work. But man.
Yeah, definitely had to do some work to beat the heat today. A lot of air conditioning, a lot of time inside. Got a little afternoon nap in, needed one. And I think the AC just makes me a little bit sleepier. Is that a thing? I feel like that's definitely a thing.
Well, it's definitely, I think your body has like this reaction to the heat where you're like, oh, your body is now trying to cool off. But then when you cool off, you're like, great, I have nothing else to do now. And then you want to sleep.
Yeah.
I made that science up, but it feels like it makes sense.
And the Christian McCaffrey deal sort of cooled things down from the Niners' perspective. How about that?
Boo! Boo! Yeah, Christian McCaffrey got an extension. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Albert Breer summed it up in a tweet that is up on, we have the visual up on our YouTube channel. If you're streaming with us, we appreciate you hanging. And if you're listening to on the podcast, check out our YouTube channel if you haven't yet. But please. Albert Breer writes, easy way to look at the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey's 2-year extension. He was due $24.2 million over the next 2 years. He's now making $32.2 million over that time. And his $12.5 million in 2026 is basically a team option. Basically what Christian McCaffrey did was guarantee the next 2 years on his deal. And he had no guaranteed money on his contract before signing the extension. And so he gets a little bit of security now. It's not like everything is different, right? Like he got a pay bump. He got a little bit of a raise. He probably got a direct deposit, and I think probably made whole in a way that we sort of talked about a couple weeks ago when we asked the question, like, is Christian McCaffrey not at 49ers off the offseason program because he wants a new deal? Turns out he did.
Yep.
And making about 19 point something million dollars a year on average, continuing to be the highest paid running back in the NFL. I think for all the reasons we talked about a couple weeks ago, it absolutely makes sense. Christian McCaffrey is not a running back that should be grouped with other running backs when it comes to, talking about the position being overvalued. We're talking about the reigning offensive player of the year who had 200 yards from scrimmage and scored 21 touchdowns and is, a player who's made the 49ers basically not unbeatable, but extremely difficult to beat since he's come to San Francisco.
Yeah.
He's been durable, only missing one game late last year, the last game of the season with a calf injury that was inconsequential. Obviously, just a super valuable player in the passing game. Everything. I don't want to say Brock Purdy doesn't ascend to where he is without Christian McCaffrey, but I do think Christian McCaffrey has been a huge help to Brock Purdy. And I think paying him, $20 million a year absolutely makes sense.
Look, they, like you said, they basically tacked on $4 million a year over the next couple of years. This is not overpaying rando wide receiver, rando tight end. Like this is your best offensive player in a team loaded with offensive weapons. This is the best one. This might be the best offensive player, non-quarterback edition in the NFL. This might be if Kyle Shanahan could create a player in a lab to play running back for his team, you would probably come out with Christian McCaffrey. There's no excuse to not do what it takes to bend over backwards to keep that guy. If you wind up losing Jawan Jennings in a couple of years, okay. If you wind up losing Aaron Banks this offseason, fine. Literally anybody, save for like Brandon Aiyuk and Brock Purdy. You keep Christian McCaffrey around. This is the right thing to do. And good on the Niners for not waiting until training camp to do a $4.5 million raise for McCaffrey. That would have been ridiculous. You didn't need that hanging over the team as well.
Yeah, and as you pointed out on NinersWire.com earlier today, the Niners also cleared like $7 million in cap space with the extension. So I think one of the underrated things about an extension is generally the flexibility it can provide you in the short term. It's kind of like, again, and this isn't an exact analogy, but restructuring contracts in many ways, like to a layman, is kind of like putting something on a credit card and then doing a payment plan on the credit card, right? Like all the money isn't coming out of your bank account right now. You're going to pay it down the line. And you're certainly not saving money, but while it's cheaper now, you're going to have to pay that down the line. And when you do get to that point, that's when, you have to release a player like Eric Armstead, right? That just as an example, right? Yeah. So that's what restructures do. That's what contract extensions can do. Excuse me, is you're essentially kicking the can down the road. And that's what the 49ers did here. And so, like things could potentially look ugly in a couple of years in terms of like them rebuilding. And at that point, it's going to be largely up to Brock Purdy to, become an elite quarterback that can be the rising tides that lifts all boats, right? Because you're going to be looking at potentially a post George Kittle world, a post Christian McCaffrey world. I think Nick Bosa is going to be around for a long time, but post Drake Greenlaw, post Charvarius Ward, right? Just a number of players who might be aged out. And you're going to have to do some roster churning, whereas like Brock Purdy is going to be your stabilizing force. But what this Christian McCaffrey deal does now in the meantime is it makes him happy. It makes him whole. He's able to say, look, running backs deserve more money, which is, I know, something that's important to him, which he's talked about before, while also giving the 49ers a little bit more flexibility now. And as we know, salary cap space rolls over. So salary cap space created now can roll into next year when you have, Brock Purdy needing a new contract. Presumably some of Brandon Aiyuk's money is going to kick in. The team's going to be more expensive. And look, we can talk about how this impacts Brandon Aiyuk. I don't think it necessarily does.
I bet he's pissed.
That's one of the funnier takes you see on the internet is like, oh man, 49ers gave Christian McCaffrey this lucrative extension. Brandon Aiyuk's got to be pissed. It's not the way it works. If anything, the 49ers are in a better position to give Brandon Aiyuk a new contract because of the salary cap space they created with this extension.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's just a way to guarantee, like we said, Christian McCaffrey had no guaranteed money on the remaining 2 years of his deal. What this extension did is basically guaranteed the final 2 years of his deal. And if he's still playing at a high level, give him earning power 3 years from now, 4 years from now, potentially. More likely than not, there will be another extension or renegotiation at that point, because Christian McCaffrey is probably not going to be coming off an Offensive Player of the Year campaign. Maybe he will be. I don't know. But, going into year 30 in the league, or not in the league, but his 30-year-old year as a running back with, presumably 300 plus touches is not going to be something that I can't imagine he's going to be the same player 3 years from now that he is now.
Yeah, not everything has to impact the Brandon Aiyuk extension, man. It's okay. Juwan Jennings, what does this mean for Brandon Aiyuk? Not shit. Nothing at all. Christian McCaffrey, was it? No. I saw a Steelers fan today hosting a Twitter Spaces, Twitter Live, whatever they call it. I think it's
we're
Spaces.
Streaming on Twitter right now, so
I think it's called a Twitter Spaces. Hosting a Twitter Spaces that was like, well, now the Niners have to trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Steelers. Like, man, what? Call somebody. Like, this is a person I know. Call me. Like, ask me. Like, this doesn't. The Niners have like over $32 million in cap space this year, which, like you said, that more importantly has nothing to do with Aiyuk. That just they can roll over to next year. They're like $45 million over the cap next year, I think, as of right now. Yep. So yeah, the wide receiver thing is going to come to a head, but like we have said, like Nick Wagner, our favorite cast member, has written about in ESPN for 2 years now. Like 2025 is the year. 2025 is the year where this all gets sticky, and that was going to get sticky whether Christian McCaffrey signed an extension or not, whether Juwan Jennings got an extension or not, whether Brock Purdy signs his extension or not. Like 2025 is going to be a difficult offseason for the 49ers in terms of which players are they keeping, which players are they letting go. And they know this is how team building goes. There's a hard salary cap, and you cannot keep everybody. And the 49ers are freaking loaded, which means, hey, their 5-year run with this core group is pretty impressive. Super duper impressive. And now they're getting
it's been the second best run in the NFL over Kyle Shanahan's tenure. I would say you could make a pretty good case. It's the second best run in the league.
Yeah, behind the Chiefs. Yeah. Even despite not having a title, just in a year in year out basis, since 2019, basically they've been contenders with largely this same group, and that's really, really impressive. But now going into 2024, they're going to get another crack at a Super Bowl, which is again when I know this isn't what this podcast is about necessarily, but the thing with the 49ers are going to have to trade one of their receivers if they want to get something for him instead of just letting Aiyuk walk, because that's the logic behind they're going to trade him to the Steelers, is that they want to get something for him. They're trying to win the Super Bowl right now. I think they'd rather try and win the Super Bowl this year and risk losing Brandon Aiyuk for a 2026 compensatory pick than trade him for a 2025 whatever right now. That's getting kind of lost in everything. The Niners are trying to win a Super Bowl still. So I don't think that picking Ricky Pearsall in the first round portended any major change right now, because that major change was going to happen. It would have already happened. And the changes coming in the future have always been going to happen. Like they've been on that kind of course for a while now. So all of that is to say the McCaffrey extension doesn't matter. At least not for future financial plans.
Well, because it matters.
Go ahead.
Here's why. I mean, it matters because you make CMC whole. You make him, you want to nurture relationships with your best players, and that's what this is moved towards.
Yeah, I just meant it doesn't matter from the wide receiver room standpoint. But go on.
Yeah, and it clears cap space. The point I want to make. And this goes back to drafting Pearsall. This goes back to, retaining Jennings and signing him to a 2-year extension. Sometimes it's not so complicated. Sometimes it's just, hey, we really like our receiving core and we want to keep these guys on affordable deals, and not everything is related, right? Like when the 49ers continued to invest premium resources in the defensive line, the thing was, it was always it was the identity of the team. It was the identity of the defense. We're going to make sure that this is a strength of ours no matter what. If we're missing a dude or two because of injuries, then we have other elite talents, former first-round picks, high-level free agents, what have you, that we can plug in. And no matter what, we're going to be in a position to put a good defensive line on the field on any given game day, right? That's how I look at this receiver thing. It's like, man, if Deebo Samuel has to miss a month with a hamstring injury, okay, now you have a pretty like decent option and potentially in Ricky Pearsall coming in. Like there's not going to be a drop off, because how many times do we see it? Like, just a reality of the league, when you're missing your best players, it's harder to win. It's just a lot harder to win. You can go back to all these different games over the last few years and the 49ers have lost. And you're like, oh, well, they didn't have Nick Bosa in that game against Atlanta. Or, oh, Richard Sherman in 2019 didn't play against that game. They didn't have K'Wan Williams in that game either. And then
against the
Falcons. And then Julio Jones went for, 1 million yards on 50 catches, right? Like there are these scenarios where, I mean, if you can maintain your strength, even when you're banged up at a certain position group, that can be really valuable. And sometimes it's just as easy as, all right, well, Brandon Aiyuk sprained his ankle and he's out for 6 weeks. So now we have Ricky Pearsall to step in, right? Instead of being this drop off. And I think there's logic in that. And I think there's also logic in looking at the long game and saying, more likely than not, beyond 2024, we're not going to have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. So let's have somebody else that we could potentially plug in who's been in the league for a year, and not somebody who's, now we're heaping all this pressure on them when we trade Deebo Samuel for the 23rd pick in the draft and then turn around and draft a receiver 23rd, because we saw how that didn't work out with Javon Kinlaw trying to replace DeForest Buckner.
Sure.
Right. So that's like, it's not like, oh gosh, the 49ers signed Juwan Jennings to a 2-year extension. That means that, they don't have any faith that Brandon Aiyuk's going to be going to sign his contract this summer, or they drafted Ricky Pearsall. That means the writing's on the wall. They're going to trade Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe if things go really, really south, that's what happens. But I just think they want to have good players and want to make sure that their receiving core is a strength, sort of no matter what. If Deebo Samuel has a groin injury and has to miss some time, or if Brandon Aiyuk, sprains an ankle or whatever, it's good to maintain a strength, even if guys get hurt. Like, that's kind of the whole point here, in my opinion.
Yeah, not to mention, just on the Pearsall pick specifically, because you said this and it dinged a bell in my head. If going into the draft, because I think part of the reason the Pearsall pick was so jarring is A, the consensus draft board didn't have him as a first round pick. B, we were so caught up, the royal we, you, me, everybody was caught up. That's the definition of the royal we. Got so caught up in the offensive line thing and the right tackle thing. And history tells us, save for the Reuben Foster pick, which is an outlier because of he was going to go like top 10 and then he fell, and the Niners thought that they could get good value there. And okay. But history tells us they're going to pick an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, or a wide receiver in the first round, or quarterback. But they weren't picking a quarterback, which left like defensive lineman, offensive lineman, and wide receiver. Well, it turns out the back end of the first round was not a good spot for this offensive line class, and they didn't like any of those dudes. So that leaves,
talked about coming in,
right? So that leaves defensive lineman and wide receiver, and they liked the wide receiver available more than the best defensive lineman available, and so they went with that guy. Like, I think if you had told me, hey, they're not going to pick an offensive lineman in the first round, I would have gone with a defensive lineman and then wide receiver in predicting.
Yeah.
It's just, I think there's been a lot of overthinking on it.
A lot of overthinking.
Yeah.
A lot of overthinking.
Yeah.
Which we do all the time because
I stay overthinking.
Well, just in life in general, for sure. But we in general, I mean, we host a podcast and are responsible for coming up with content and have to talk about draft picks for hours and hours on end. So obviously we're going to overthink it, and we're not saying that, we're exempt from that. But I think just in general for team building, sometimes it's a lot more simple than it's talked about, right? Like sometimes it's just as simple as, yeah, we think he's good, and we want to have as many good receivers as we can.
Draft good players. I think that's a pretty good philosophy.
Like, it's been proven that Brock Purdy excels with good weapons. So let's make sure we have more good weapons for Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty sound line of thinking.
Yeah.
So.
Quick bit of news from mandatory minicamp. Brandon Aiyuk, obviously not there. Would be stunned if he does anything with the team before getting a contract, which I still think he will do. And Trent Williams not there, but an excused absence. He was at his daughter's graduation. What was the other one? There was one more piece of news. Oh, Cameron Latu. Cameron Latu is going to be ready for training camp. Watch out, everybody. Oh, and the Niners signed Logan Thomas today.
Yeah, we'll see.
Bro,
the tight end position is like an entire crapshoot after George Kittle. I don't have much analysis other than maybe one of these dudes will get on the field at some point. Yeah,
I've got takes. Okay. I think this is going to be the best number 2 tight end the 49ers have had under Kyle Shanahan. And I know this is super in the weeds on 49ers roster shit, and I know that the amount of people that care about this is probably very, very low, but I don't have a lot of places to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it here because I'm definitely not talking about this on my radio show. So buckle up, everybody. Logan Thomas takes. What?
No, yeah, we'll save the good stuff for your radio show. We'll eat some garbage here on Candlestick Chronicles.
All right, you want to talk Kings? We can fucking talk Kings, dog. God.
Just kidding.
Jacoby Walter, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably a person that exists in some place.
No, all right. So Logan Thomas, here we go. So this has this is the TE2, the tight end 2 thing has been a weird obsession of mine since the 49ers went to try and sign Austin Hooper in the 2019 offseason, 2020 offseason, whenever it was. And it was like, oh, they're looking for another pass catching tight end. And then they picked up Jordan Reed, and he was like a wide receiver who played tight end. And oh my God, look, another pass catching option. It's felt like Kyle Shanahan has been trying to get another pass catching tight end who can also credibly be a blocker, where the Niners can do some 2 tight end stuff where they have that deception, that disguise, that ability to throw out of run formations and vice versa, right? Like that's kind of the whole ethos of the Kyle Shanahan offense. And they've not really been able to do that. Logan Thomas last year had 55 catches for 496 yards and 4 touchdowns in 16 games as the number 1 tight end with the Commanders. Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner in their careers combined 55 catches, 638 yards and 5 touchdowns. This is a massive upgrade as a receiving tight end for the Niners. And when it's Cam Latu and Braden, all due respect to these guys, and Braden Willis, who are massive question marks, and somebody named Eric Saubert, who's a person that I heard of when I read his name on the roster. Mason Pline, who went to a college called Furman. I work with a girl who went to Furman. She has a shirt that says F you, and I think that's really cool because Furman University. And I think that's there might be Jake Tongas is also a person on the roster. He's on the practice squad all year last year. There's just not a lot of proven entities at the tight end spot behind George Kittle. And now I think Logan Thomas gives the 49ers a viable receiving option if George Kittle gets hurt, which he is wont to do. And I think it gives them a really viable pass catching option and Logan Thomas isn't a dominant blocker, but he's capable. And I think there's a very real chance that we get a different wrinkle with the Niners offense this year where they're running more multiple tight end stuff and doing things out of those multiple tight end sets that they have not been able to do in the past with Ross Dwelly or with Charlie Werner or anybody else that they've had as the TE2 alongside George Kittle.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think my point would be, I think it's more about depth behind Kittle in case Kittle does get hurt, and there not being such a huge drop off in that case, more so than playing with two tight ends probably. Because Charlie Warner, somebody who would play 8 to 10 snaps a game.
Sure,
I'd have to go back and look, but as a number 2 tight end, I think when you have Kyle Juszczyk and you have Juwan Jennings, both of whom can impact the game, both in the running game as blockers and obviously in the passing game too. I think you just don't need a real viable second tight end. But I completely agree with your point that like George Kittle's getting up there. He's coming off core muscle surgery. This is really going to be, I think this is the first offseason, at least that I can remember with Kittle, where he had a procedure that pretty much prevented him from being available for the bulk of the offseason, right? Like Kittle, one of the reasons why Kittle has become what he's become is because of his offseason work, right? And that all ties into tight end university. And even, he was somebody who's sort of always at the offseason program, even though he's a, highly paid, highly accomplished veteran. He's just like that type of dude who really enjoys what he does and doing the offseason stuff. He's not able to do that this offseason because of the core muscle surgery he had in February or March, whenever it was. So I think you're at the point in Kittle's career where, an insurance policy is good, particularly if you don't trust the tight ends that you've drafted in the last couple of years to fill in at even a replacement level, which I don't think you can, Braden Willis and Jordan and Cam Latu, sorry. I don't think you can count on them to be that guy. And we know Logan Thomas can at least play in the league.
Charlie Werner last year played 312 snaps. He played more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, not including week 18, which was weird because Kittle didn't play in that game. And he played more than 15 in basically every other game except 3 or 4 here. Like he played a decent amount, not an insignificant amount of snaps. And I just think the ability
20% of the snaps. Go back and look.
Stand by. I have it right here. He put. Oh, it unorganized them for me. You piece of. He played.
You got to go to the team
29, just to take over 29% of the snaps.
Okay, so that's more than I thought.
So look, it's not like, oh my God, they're going to become this 12 personnel team or something crazy like that. Like or it's 22 personnel. I don't think it's that. I just think when there are 2 tight ends on the field, I think we might see them throw out of those spots more. Charlie Werner had 1 target last year. I don't know. I'm not expecting Logan Thomas to catch 60 balls or anything. I think that the threat of having that player is going to be a significant thing. All right.
Do you think...
To hell with you guys.
Do you think the Charlie Werner pick lived up to the analysis that said the 49ers had their Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez combination?
Yeah. They had a 6th-round pick. They had a 6th-round pick who played out his entire rookie contract. Good for them. I remember more Charlie Werner drops than I do like plays.
I do think Charlie Werner
tutty in Atlanta, where he now plays.
I do think though overall he was a good blocking tight end for them. Like a guy in his role, he played his role well. It was never like, oh man, get Charlie Werner off the field, he stinks. It was like when he was like pretty athletic and could could handle his blocking assignments. He's not somebody you're throwing to on 3rd and 8 in the Super Bowl if you don't have to. But
no, he didn't. No, he's a good football player, and he's probably going to be in the league for like 15 years. But he's a blocker. That's it.
Matt Barrows wrote a pretty glowing review of Ricky Pearsall today, Tuesday, from 49ers mandatory minicamp. I think Barrows has a pretty good eye, at least in terms of, what he sees on the practice field.
Yeah.
And, seasoned beat reporter who I think can decipher what translates from the practice field to game days, right? Like we were talking beforehand. And I think I was probably guilty of this. I think you mentioned 2018 or 2019 when there were these reports that Trent Taylor was like having an awesome training camp and he was going to have, 100 catches and turn into Julian Edelman or whatever, Wes Welker.
Right. Pick your guy.
That did not end up happening. But I do think, look, the thing with Pearsall to me is watching him play at Florida. Like it seems like a dude who like has the physical traits, also has really good hands and just kind of has the goods, like the physicality. And to hear that, I think Barrows called him the most prolific receiver during the offseason program, which in fairness, Brandon Aiyuk hasn't been there. Deebo Samuel's not one to get a ton of reps in the spring. All the caveats aside, I do think it's notable that he's developing a rapport with Brock Purdy because so much of what works with the 49ers passing game is relying on chemistry and timing. And look, I'm not saying just because Ricky Pearsall is, looking good in mini camp, padless practices, and also not going against Diamador Lenore or Charvarius Ward, who are not practicing, that, I think he's going to have a 1,400-yard season as a rookie. But I just think it's notable given that, like, all those crossing routes and all those out routes and all those throws that we see Brock Purdy make before his receivers come out of their breaks, those plays are products of trust and timing and chemistry, right? Like Brock Purdy throws to spots where he thinks knows his receivers are going to be. And that's what makes Brandon Aiyuk so valuable to the offense, right? It's all these timing crossing routes. Like Brock Purdy's always throwing before receivers make their breaks. Not always, but often. Often enough to where it's like, damn, that's kind of like a thing he does. Yeah. Big A. Shout out to JT O'Sullivan. So the fact that I think Ricky Pearsall is developing that rapport with Brock Purdy, I think is a positive development. I'm not going to go so far as to say Ricky Pearsall is going to be good enough to where the 49ers can survive an injury at receiver, because, maybe it's probably far too early to say that yet. But I do think it's just a positive development because of the way Brock Purdy plays.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't want to take too much away from like minicamp and OTAs because the pads could come on and Ricky Pearsall could wilt like that. I think that's just a thing that has happened to many players who have looked good in OTAs. But
he wasn't Dante Pettis in college. Like he was a physical dude at Florida and took a lot of hits and went over the middle. Like he was that type of player.
I am optimistic about Ricky Pearsall. The thing that matters the most to me with this is the fact that in an opportunity where a good player should probably thrive and shine, he did. And again, does that translate directly to NFL success? No, we still need to see that. But this is notable because if he had been just like, yeah, he was fine, it wouldn't be like, oh my God, his career is over, he's a bust. But the fact that he stood out by being that productive is a positive note to file away when going into training camp. Like, okay, Ricky Pearsall put together a really nice off-season program. You got to do it in camp, but you'd rather be really, really good in this setting than just either actively bad or just not notable. So it's definitely a good sign.
And I feel like, I mean, look, remember AJ Jenkins in 2012? It was like his first practices in Santa Clara. He like couldn't even stay on his feet. It was like very apparent to anyone who had eyes who watched AJ Jenkins practice in his first spring. It was like, oh, this guy sucks.
Jesus.
This dude cannot stay on his feet. Like this is a long road for him to get good.
Yeah.
Whereas at least with Pearsall, it's like, all right, he can do the things. He can. We don't know if he's going to be good, but at least we know he's not terrible.
Yeah.
Early on,
right.
Which is frankly a positive for a rookie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see him in pads going up against, other corners. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
I would, like him, and we're going to try to make it to training camp.
Like go to training camp, not just try and make it personally. Like, hey, we're not
going to try out for the team. we're not going to try out and suit up. We're gonna try to get credentials and go watch ourselves. But like, would be really interested to see Ricky Pearsall against Charvarius Ward.
Yeah, a big physical corner.
Yeah, that's kind of like what.
Who per source is just trying to get the bag.
Man, Mooney Ward had just if you haven't seen Mooney Ward's press availability on Tuesday, go watch the video. I think the Niners post all their videos on their YouTube account. But just some great stuff about going to Africa, trying to get
Incredible.
the bag. Mooney Ward, just high quality stuff.
He's got the Southern accent. It's great. He's a fun listen for sure. I think that's all I got.
We're keeping it short tonight.
Keeping it short, just under 40 minutes.
I mean, we're pulling the curtain back. We're like, all right, let's do like a 20-minute pod tonight.
Every time.
And whenever we
every goddamn time.
It's like 55 minutes.
Every time. I see the countdown clock is at 37:21 right now. We're done now. We're done right now.
I'm gonna make one quick point. Receivers cycle through during training camp. JC on YouTube says that's not his role, though. He won't be going against number one cornerbacks.
Sure.
He will in training camp. There will be plenty of opportunities for Ricky Pearsall to go up against Charvarius Ward. So
yeah, that's not to say if he gets punked by Charvarius Ward that he's a bust. It's just it's going to be interesting to juxtapose that and see like that will be fun to watch because that'll be like the hey, where's he at? Like it'll be a good measuring stick matchup.
Yeah, because Charvarius Ward could put him on his ass at the line of scrimmage every play.
Yeah.
Or he could,
but
get open and make some plays, or he could,
But to JC's
more likely
point,
than not, it's going to be some shade of gray.
But to JC's point, if/when Ricky Pearsall gets on the field in week 1, he's not going to see Sauce Gardner. I don't think the Jets are putting sauce on.
He might
on old RP.
He might.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of corners in the league just play sides of the field. They're not always like for top corners to shadow a team's number one receiver is actually kind of rare. Cornerbacks play sides of the field, so they're. I mean, if Ricky Pearsall is on the field in an 11 set and he's out wide, I don't know which side Sauce plays. I haven't dove into the Jets all 22.
Yeah, not yet.
But I think there's absolutely a chance he could go up against Sauce.
All right, fine, whatever. Bryce Herbert makes a great point in the chat. ESPN 1320, 10 a.m. tomorrow, where we won't be talking about the 49ers backup tight end situation.
10 a.m. Pacific.
10 a.m. Pacific, that's right. YouTube.com/ESPN 1320. And while you're here, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Candlestick Chronicles Podcast, or just search Candlestick Chronicles on YouTube. You can find us there as well. We are also available wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, especially if they're Niner fans, to subscribe to the YouTube channel and/or the podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
See ya.